We're going to spend the time looking at that this evening. When we made our plans to go to China a number of years ago, we were told to be very careful about the words that we used and the things we did there. We've been asked a number of times since 2011, were we ever afraid when we were there, and we never were. We were at a university that had had many Christians teach oral English for a number of years. The dean of the language department was in an apartment just above us and heard us singing hymns every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. She knew we believed in God, but she also knew that we cared about those students. And we spent time with the students, and we had them in our apartment often. And so they, if you will, compromised a little bit to allow us to come into their university, knowing that whatever they gave up, they gained by having us there. And I speak to others who were part of the teachers who were there. The first week we were in China, my youngest brother sent me a message. He says, "Gary, I've seen something on your website. I did a search, and I'm concerned for your life." And what he found was a time way before 2011 that I had done some research on Daniel chapter 6. And I had quoted a news person, Mona Charen, talking about the persecutions that were taking place in China. And so when he did a search for China, boom, that popped up. It took many milliseconds for it to pop up. And suddenly he was concerned that the People's Republic of China would do a similar search and we would be in trouble. I went to my website very quickly and modified the language briefly, not much, and never felt that it was an issue. But I appreciated his being concerned for me. I did some research 2 weeks ago in preparation for tonight. The 2021 World Watch List. It's an official group that keeps records of persecutions in our world toward believers. And according to them, there are 340 million believers who live in fear because of their belief in God. It's for a variety of reasons, Islamic and others. Sudan is one of the worst, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, China, and other places are on that list. And they do a map, and I didn't print it in color, so it's difficult to see some of the details. But if you want to do a search, International Christian Concern Hall of Fame, you'll see some of the numbers of groups and places where people are concerned for their life. When we moved to Beijing, I was the minister at the Beijing Church of Christ. Because of the Olympics, it was an approved, sanctioned religious body in downtown Beijing. We were less than about 5 kilometers, I've never used that word until we went to China, miles from the Tiananmen Square and the bird nest where the Olympics were held and other places. And we had much freedom there because of the Olympics. They had made some modifications. They allowed people to come in that otherwise they would not have allowed to come in. They allowed companies to come in and establish companies there, and many are still there. Papa John's was about 200 yards from our apartment in Beijing. I was in hog heaven when I saw it across the way. Home, comfort food, if you will. Terry was in the language school that semester. Never uncomfortable getting on the bus, never uncomfortable using taxis, never uncomfortable sitting in a room with 30, 40 people speaking nothing but Mandarin. writing nothing but Chinese characters on a board, learning the language. And so we were blessed, and we were protected, I think, while we were there. Had to be mindful. We were not to embarrass the government in any way. We were to do our job. Anytime we referred to Christian values, if we will, we used the words American culture. Terry and I both read Scripture in our classes, those 4 semesters with 1,200 students, based on American culture. This is what would be taken, or this is what would happen at a wedding, or this is what would whatever. We studied idioms to help them improve their oral English, and we used Proverbs. So we were blessed in many ways to be there. But when you come to Daniel 6, something is projected here that is so basic, it's so commonsensical and so basic, and yet it's a powerful, powerful message. Calling the lions was a common circumstance at this time in that place. And like last week, we need to realize that Daniel is now about 80 years old. And in Daniel 6, we're told that Darius had appointed 120 satraps, and 3 were part of administrators over those 120 satraps, and Daniel was one of those. In verse 3, Daniel so distinguished himself that he had exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. God had blessed him. God blessed him because of the next verse, because it says, his qualities, his exceptional qualities, but the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. Very quickly we're told that he had a life as an 80-year-old that was above reproach. People did the homework, they did the research, they watched him, they analyzed, they tried to find fault with him, and they could not. And that's a beginning point when we close in several minutes. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. And finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, but Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." In other words, he's following God's will for his life, if we apply it to modern day circumstances. But they devised a system that they believed could bring about his demise. They went to Darius and convinced him by flattery, first of all, "O King Darius, live forever," verse 6. And verse 7, all of these people, and make a long list of the 120 and many others, who've all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. The text tells us 120 administrators and prefects and satraps and advisors and governors, potentially 200 to 400 people, we believe, come up with this plan honoring him, follow the crowd, and issue an edict. And it has something to do with how you pray, to whom you pray. And in 30 days, we're going to be watching Daniel. That's the only reason it was brought into being. And so King Darius, verse 9, put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. I'm going to go to the end of the lesson as we talk about the verses and give you the ending and then continue. I'm not almost through, but this is one of two closing points. If we're going to be faithful to God when the hardest times come, when they call the lions, we use the metaphor, when they call the lions, we must be steady about what we've always done. What do you do today, this week, this month? What have you done in the past as a Christian? What will you do as a matter of habit? And it's a good habit. It's a matter of who you are. It's a matter of what you're about. It has to do with spiritual disciplines, more than prayer, but certainly prayer should be one of them. Devoted for 80 years coming into this foreign land as an early teen, we believe. And now as an 80-year-old, the Scriptures just told us that Daniel just did what he had always done. He just did what he had always done. The edict was in one ear, out the other, my words. He did what he had always done. And so, these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. Verse 11. Part of his prayer was a petition for help on his behalf. And they went to the king and told him, reminded him of this decree. It seems as if probably some time had passed, but not that much. And going back to remind him of this decree seemed to tell us that this is a busy king. It was something he did perhaps quickly, without much thought, but it was something he had done. And it says, "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den?" And the king answered, "Yes, and it cannot be annulled. Once you put your stamp on it, you can't turn back. You can't change your mind." Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, going back 70 years. Darius wasn't in the throne there, but he was one of the three administrators. But by telling him that, they wanted him to know his origin. Maybe thinking Darius had forgotten that he was one of those who was brought here those many years ago. But he's one of those Hebrew boys that came from afar. And didn't you say that those who bow down to anyone other than you or the gods would be put to death? Daniel still prays 3 times a day. Daniel did what he's always done. And when the king heard this, verse 14, he was greatly distressed, determined to rescue Daniel, make every effort until sundown to save him. They wouldn't let him. They held him to his decree against his better nature, and therefore he had to allow it to move forward. And he gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him in the lion's den. But the picture seems to be that as he was being taken there, the king says, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Now again, that main point repeated by the Spirit of God to be sure we don't miss it. He did what he had always done. He did what he continuously did. That was who Daniel was. It wasn't an afterthought. Wasn't a new thing. It wasn't a fad that would come and pass away. It wasn't something that for a period of his life he was into it, if you will. It was something that described who he was. It's what he did continuously. And what's neat, the king is the one who said that. The king knows this man. The king knew his habits. And that's why it seems to be that this idea of 200 to 300 people of offering a decree was not something that he had really thought through. Because knowing that Daniel continually did this should have encouraged him not to make that decree. But a man of honor, he could not pass it away. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. I think we're told that just to be certain that we understand that he did not somehow sneak out and then coming out for a while, go back in, or anything like that. The signet ring and the rings of others sealed the tomb. He could not get out of that den, if you will. And to his credit, the king, verse 18, spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and deservingly so, he could not sleep. He had Daniel on his mind. He knew what he had edicted should not have been an edict. He wanted so badly for what was likely to happen not to happen. Chances are he had heard about Shadrach and Meshach being thrown into the fiery furnace. Maybe those things had been passed down over these 65 plus years when these men, young men and now older men, had come from afar. What did he expect? I don't know, but he said exactly what we would want him to say. May your God rescue you. Everything is set into place to where it cannot happen otherwise. May your God rescue you so I will not have done what I never intended to do. And that is to bring about your death. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Apparently he couldn't see in, but he was in anguish waiting to see what the night would bring. And the morning comes and he's there, and Daniel answered, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king. The first point, do what you've always done. If you're going to be faithful when the hard time is suddenly brought into your life, when you're taken to the den of lions, what habits do you have in place that will not change, that will sustain you during those times? Those of us as parents, be sure you talk to your children about these things. Those of us as we deal with grandchildren, be sure they see us practicing those things. Be a person of prayer. Be a person of meditation. Be a person of looking at Scripture regularly and seeking to teach it and apply it to your life. Be a person that has something in place that's part of who you are. And it will be there when you're taken to the den of lions. And then he's giving us the second point. It's not just what you do, but it's who you are in front of people. It's not your private time. It's not your spiritual disciplines done for your sustaining your own faith. It's so that you can be seen and known by others. I've done nothing wrong before you, O king. He had been faithful to a heathen king, the third in line, we believe. He had been faithful to God, but he had been faithful to the king as he was still faithful to God. It's possible in America to be a Christian and be faithful to God and be faithful to our country. I was thinking this afternoon, in America, we are laughed at sometimes because we claim a belief and have an allegiance toward it. The persecution might come as we would seek to share what we believe with others. Embarrassment, maybe laughter would come. I don't really think that counts as persecution. Do you? If you want to give someone a Bible and you're precluded from doing that in a public place, maybe in a school setting, in a work setting, do we call that persecution? I don't think so. This time of year, we're going to find that in some states, in some counties and cities, there will be people fighting desperately to put religious symbols out in front of courtyards as decorative items for the coming season. And people will go to court and they'll have someone say that you can't do that. You can't push your religion on someone else, and all the things that are part of those circumstances. Do we call that persecution? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm thankful what 340 million people go through on a regular basis is not what we go through very often in our country. What if it changed? And that's really the importance of Daniel 6 for us tonight. What if it changed? What are we doing continuously that depicts who we are before God? It says to that person in the mirror each morning, that's who I am. That's who I will always be. Whatever comes, whatever might happen, that's who I am. And being that person will have an effect on other people. In a way, we see the satraps and others having watched Daniel and setting him up, if you will, to test his faith, his practices. That's exactly what sometimes could happen to us. People watching, people wondering, something said at school, work, in the marketplace. What's Gary's response? What are you going to do? Are we going to lash out? Are we going to politely make a comment and move on? What are we going to do? What if things begin to change? So it's not only doing the things that we do continuously, but being the person that we've always been. Who I am today represents who I've been yesterday and other years, hopefully. Who I am in other years and today is who I intend to be tomorrow. That's my conviction, that's my determination, and it won't happen unless we have a conviction and we have a determination to be that same person when, and you fill in the blank. The story was published in a Nashville newspaper. I was given this example by someone who lived in Nashville when it was published. He did not give me dates. The Tennessean likely. I actually once wrote a sports column for about 4 months for the Nashville Banner as a freshman in college. It's no longer there. But a Nashville newspaper carried a story a number of years ago about Mrs. Lila Craig. Mrs. Lila Craig. And the story told people there that she had not missed worship services for 1,040 Sundays. 365 days to a year, but 52 weeks to a year. So those of you who are good at math, I'm not. My calculator's not here. 52 into 1,040. Even numbers, probably we could figure it out pretty quickly. 1,040 Sundays. She was in her 80s at the time of the article. The editor, giving that information, then raised a series of questions. And in raising the questions, you're going to hear someone raised in a Bible Belt circumstance, and they would have been relevant questions that someone would think about. The person who wrote it showed themselves to be probably a Christian who had some understandings about certain things. The editor commented, "It makes one wonder, what's the matter with Miss Craig? Doesn't she ever have unexpected company? How is it that she never goes anywhere on Saturday night so she's too tired to attend Sunday morning worship service the next day?" If you need to move quietly as I'm kicking our shins and stepping on our toes, that's probably the intent of the one who wrote the letter, who wrote the article. Doesn't she ever beg off to attend picnics or family reunions on Sunday morning? 1,040 Sunday morning services without missing. Does she never have headaches or colds or nervous spells or tired feelings? The hypothetical questions ask. Does she ever oversleep or need time just to read the Sunday newspaper? Hasn't she ever been angry at the minister or had her feelings hurt by someone and felt justified in staying home to just hear a good sermon on the radio or television? What's the matter with Ms. Craig anyway? She did what she has always done continually. My parents made a statement to me a long time ago. I'm thankful for it. They said, "Gary, when we become a Christian, we make certain decisions. It's a decision of the will. It's not subject to feelings. It's not subject to personal choice. It's a matter of the will. I will do certain things." Mrs. Lila Craig apparently had followed that practice when she says, "I will attend Sunday morning worship. Nothing will deter me." In the article, the editor acknowledged things that sometimes deters people from attending Sunday morning services. I suggest that Mrs. Craig was doing the same thing that Daniel was doing when they called for the lions. Being what she had always been, doing what she had always done, trusting whom she had always trusted. Let's make good decisions as Christians. Let's live so that what if occurs, we'll be faithful to God. Let's set priorities and just not let things find their way into our schedule. Be that person who's ready to take on the lions, knowing that God will always be there to give us what we need at the time we need it. And of course, that's a metaphor. The chances of me ever being in a den of lions is very far-fetched, but the principle is real. It's real. And let's learn the lesson. If we can be an encouragement to you in any way, let us do that as we stand and sing a song of encouragement.